All right, so welcome back to another episode of Finding Your Way with Lori and Tonya. So we are excited that you had us, and this is your first time listening to us. Listen, you are here for a reason. We wholeheartedly believe that you found us for a reason. So welcome. And if you are a subscriber, thank you guys. We're excited to have you here today. So Lori, what are we talking about today?
So, we're filling up people's toolboxes with all those little tools that we used early on and still use today. So most of the things we've been talking about are things that we actually practice on a regular basis. And this is one of those. And it's all about journaling, which I know you and I could probably talk about for forever, just because there are different ways to journal. We don't even journal the same way. And so I don't know that a lot of people talk about that. Like, how do you do it? You just expect people to know. And I know, years ago, I would open up a new journal and not quite know what to put in it. And so we're going to talk through several different ideas for you. There's millions others, but we're going to share some that have worked for us in the past and some that we still use.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this is one that it was a little intimidating to me to start. It was, part of the first retreat that we went to, and everybody was doing it. And I'm not a very good writer. So I think, we're our worst critics, right? And so when everybody talked about journaling, I thought, well, gosh, am I supposed to write down like every thought and feeling I have all day long? Like, am I supposed to write how my day was? I really didn't know. And so for me, this started off one way that was less intimidating, and then kind of has just transformed over the years into, and still transforms. There's still some weeks I do it differently than others, but for me, journaling started off as a gratitude list. It was the only thing that I think at the time I could put in a play that felt good to me, and I had the confidence to be able to do. And so I started off just every day sitting down and writing a list of gratitude, and I would add to my list. So sometimes I do it in the morning, sometimes I'd add to it during the day. My journal always stayed in my car with me. I do it at night before bed. And so the first couple of months, it really was just a gratitude list for me, in journal form. And then it kind of started to grow. And for me, it was a little bit different. My growth was adding things like affirmations. So then I would say, okay, here's my list of gratitude, and then here are a couple of affirmations that I feel like I need today or this week. And sometimes they would be the same ones for the week, and sometimes they change daily. And so that was kind of how I began the journaling.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And so same thing for me with the gratitude list. That was sort of an easy button. You press the easy button for that one because you can always think of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things that you're grateful for. And like you, sometimes I forget to do it in the morning, and I do it before I go to bed at night and that kind of thing. Or, if I was really feeling the gratitude, I might whip my journal out and write it down. I did have early on a little book that it was like a daily log almost. And it was like, today I was happy because, and it was like blank. And so each day you would write something in it. And that helped me early on because, we've talked about it several times. My mindset was pretty negative, and I was really thinking about all that was going wrong in my life. And so just that prompting of, but what went right in your day today? Let's start there. It doesn't have to be that you overhaul your whole life and go from miserable to happy overnight. That just isn't realistic. But how can I use this journal to start getting me a step closer each day? And so it was writing down things I was grateful for, things that brought me joy that day, things that made me laugh that day. Really, really simple things like that was how I got started because, I've always been a rule follower. And so a blank journal doesn't have any rules, right? So it can be a little bit intimidating because it's like, well, what am I supposed to write in this darn thing? It's not like a diary, it's a journal. What goes in it? And so that was really where I started. It morphed for me pretty quickly. I've never been one, I pray all the time, but I've never been one very comfortable praying out loud, like in front of people. There's something that happens between my brain and my mouth where I stumble a little bit on my words. but I felt very comfortable writing my prayers down in my own handwriting. And so that was probably the second step for me, was taking it from I'm grateful for all these things to, like pages of prayer. And I still have those from years ago. And that was what was my next zone of comfort for journaling.
And I think for me, it evolved into some of the women were talking about some of the journals that they had that had the prompts in them. And so it would ask a question about how you felt today, or it ask a question about, I remember one was kind of a fun one. It was, if your life was a movie, what would the soundtrack be? So it was just fun little prompts that really kind of made you think. It brought some feeling to the table. It made me think outside the box a little bit, and about personal things maybe I wouldn't have thought about because I'm worried about all the life stuff. And so I think for me, it was a way to hone in on a specific thing, thought, feeling, and it made me feel good, especially when you use the right prompts. And then there's some that we use even now, especially now that I think we know ourselves and we're aware. There's a lot of times when I've got one or two of these journals that they kind of make you dig deep, and they're a little uncomfortable. And so in the beginning, I never would have been able to use one of those because I wasn't ready to dig deep or able to. Everything the surface was so thick. So I think that some of those prompts are when I'm not feeling great, or I'm struggling with something and I just can't put my finger on, why am I feeling like this? It's heavy, or it's sad or angry. And then I know you do these too. And it's interesting, the difference in the help it can be.
Yeah. And so there are journals you can buy. I tend to buy blank ones that I can put whatever I want to in it. But there are ones that you can buy that do have those prompts in them that sort of gets you started and gets your ideas pumping. But yes, after we had done quite a bit of inner work where we were getting to know ourselves a little bit better and diving a little bit deeper, what I found sort of comfort in is the journal where you could put some of those thoughts that you really don't want anybody else to know, on paper. And so, we've talked about how we talk to people, how we talk to ourselves, and that kind of thing, that we want to minimize the negative we're putting out there, right? And so in the old days, I might complain about something for forever. Like I'd complain about one thing to all the people, anybody that would listen, I would complain to. And after I started realizing that when we do that, all we're doing is you're staying in that cycle of negativity, basically. And so the journal became almost like a place I could put that so that I could get it out, because that's what I was trying to do, was get it out of myself, because I didn't like it and didn't like the way it made me feel. And so now I use my journal to write those things so that I'm not feeling the need to complain and blame to other people, which only brings them down and doesn't do a whole lot for me either in a positive way. So definitely use journal that way. Some prompting questions, like if I'm feeling really angry about something or sad or really any kind of negative feeling, is, just getting real still and figuring out, like naming it, almost naming what it is. Is it anger? Is it sadness? Is it grief? What is it? And where do I feel it in my body? Do I have a headache? Do I have, butterflies in my stomach? Is my chest tight? Like really naming that and writing those things down in my journal. And then really thinking about, when have I felt like that before? And what is it similar? Like, is it the same stuff coming up over and over and over again? And if I want to change it, like, what can I do right now to change it? Or if I was going to take 5% more responsibility for not feeling that way, what could that look like? And so those kind of prompting questions, just always having in the back of your mind for when you do feel bad, you want to get it out, but you don't quite know how. Those questions have helped me to almost bring focus and direction to what I'm feeling so that I can get it out, because I was notorious for not feeling the feelings, just stuffing them down, swallowing them, and not ever really releasing them. And so the journal is a way to, in a more healthy way, release those negative feelings.
Yes. And that's exactly how I've used that particular idea as well, is, when you get that heavy and you want to, I've actually recently looked back at some of my journals, and I was kind of having a day of struggle, and I thought, I've written some things down, and I went back and looked at some old journals from a couple of years ago, and I was looking and I was like, wow, okay, my struggle today is nothing like my struggle 30 years ago. Like, I'm so self-aware, so much more self-aware.
Yeah.
But I did look, and it's kind of the same thing. Like, I was writing almost like all the stuff, like trying to get out all the stuff that was making me feel yucky. This was happening in my life, this person, this event, this work thing, I was just writing it all down in this way of, kind of like you said, instead of going back and forth with a bunch of people and complaining about it to a lot of people, it was a great place to just show up and throw up, right? Just put it all down in one place and then be able to walk away from it, and get it out. It doesn't mean that you completely, I think sometimes we replay things in our minds over and over and over because we want to hold on to them. We don't want to forget them, because even though they're bad, we want to remember them as our lesson, or remember that person, what they did to us. I think a lot of times what I've found is when I can write it down, I can let it go, or I'm more apt to move forward, to be able to try to let it go when I can write it down. So I definitely use it as that as well.
Sometimes it's just getting it out of your head, so it's not that play on repeat. Yes. Over and over. I know both of us have done that, where, when you find yourself in that cycle of you're thinking about the same darn thing over and over and over, and it's not getting you anywhere, but you're just getting stuck and you feel stuck, putting it down in writing, it's almost like before you go to bed at night, if you got things on your mind, you can put them on a piece of paper, they'll be there when you wake up in the morning, and somehow it helps you sleep easier and it helps your mind rest. And so journaling can do that too, with even really big life events and things that are struggle.
Well, and I'll say one of the things I was surprised at looking back at some of the older versions of mine were, I wrote some things down in a way that I would never have said it out loud to somebody, because I would have been really worried about their judgment to me about my feelings about that event. And it made me feel such a way. And boy, when I wrote it down, and you could tell it was just for me, because I never would have gotten that out of my system by saying it out loud to somebody else, because of the judgment about my feelings. Yeah. And so it can be helpful in that way as well.
Absolutely. Somebody told me recently that you just have to get it out, and you almost, so she was leading me through a little exercise where had identified some anger that I was holding on to, and she was like trying to get me to physically get it out of my body. And it was almost like the girl on that movie Pitch Perfect, where she would sing and nothing would come out. She was like, Lori, is that the loudest you can grunt? Is that the loudest you can yell? And I was like, yes. But it's almost like that in a journal. Like, you can write the ugliest stuff, that it's like all these ugly things you would never say to somebody, because that's just not how we are raised to be and to say, but you're thinking it and it's stuck in your mind. And so you can get it out without hurting anybody, but it helps you to release it.
That's exactly right. And so that's definitely one way we've used journaling. And then, I think another way I use it is, I said affirmations, but also future visioning. We've talked about this in a previous podcast about, dreaming and visioning and doing future visioning. But a lot of times I will sit down as part of my journaling for the day, and I'll pick something like, where do I see my relationship in a year? Or where do I see my career in 5 years, or where do we see this one day? Like, and I'll just play and I'll write it like it's already happened. And almost sometimes I'll write a letter. Sometimes I write a letter to my future husband. I've been known to write a letter as somebody's future boss about how amazing my company is that I created, and thanking them for being a part of my team. And so future visioning is also a really fun way to journal and also remember what we put out, we're manifesting. So it's fun to be able to do that.
Yeah. And we've also done where we write letters as if we're our future self, right? So as if you're a year in the future writing a letter back to you now, which seems so strange, but it's emotional. Like it really is emotional. Just like when you do those meditations where you see your future self and you have to have a conversation with them, or you see your child self, you know. So like even using your journal to do those types of things where you write your future self a letter, or you write little 3-year-old yourself a letter and say what you need to say, because nobody has to see it but you. And so sometimes what I've heard future vision and what we're talking about, when you write it down, it's called scripting. Like you're scripting your future, and that's a huge manifestation tool. And you know, me and Tonya are all about some manifestation. We love it. It's one of our favorite things. And so scripting, also like when we do meditate and you get in that space of stillness and things come up in meditation that you don't want to lose, because you're in sort of that altered state of your mind. And so when you finish your meditation, even just doing some automatic writing, or at least you know, getting down on paper the things that came up in that meditation, I've used my journal in that way too.
Yeah. So, you know, there's no right or wrong. I mean, that is really and truly what this podcast is about, is to give you some ideas on what's worked for us, what we've seen other people do, but there's really no right or wrong. Just and you don't have to do it the same way every time. Mine has morphed, and some weeks I do it differently than others. It's according to what headspace I'm in and what I need and how it feels. And at night I do it differently than I do during the day. And so, you know, the end all be all is it's a great tool, and don't be scared of it. I mean, I was scared of it in the beginning, and it took me months to stop just writing gratitude and to start really finding my voice.
That's exactly right.
And my voice just that I can hear. Nobody else had to hear it. It wasn't about anybody else.
And I say to make it fun is to get a journal that you like the one that really you just enjoy writing in, getting some really good pens, that helps. Yeah. And like creating that space for yourself to do it daily. So, you know, Tonya talks about sitting on her back porch with a cup of coffee and journaling, and that just, it makes you feel like you would feel good doing that, or sitting on the beach, or, you know, wherever. But when you have those moments, create the space for it. And somehow that voice just flows a little bit easier when you do that, when sort of surround yourself with a journal you like and a pen you like to write with, and maybe you got some sounds in the background that you really like. And so that's what's worked for us. And I'm sure we will try a million other different things of ways to journal in the future, and some may stick and some may not, just like all of the tools that we share through our podcast. So hopefully this helps anybody that was been feeling stuck with how they write in a journal. It really has been a life-changing tool for both of us.
Absolutely. So go buy yourself one that feels good. Put your hands on it, make it feel good. Like Lori said, great pens are always helpful. And we've just found that putting things in your own writing is huge. It's definitely a differentiator. So go get yourself a journal. There's no right or wrong. I promise you will get something from it.